Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 8 of the Decred Assembly. Today on the show, we have FluffyPony, or Riccardo Spagni.
Close enough.
And today on the show, we also have a guest co-host, Austin. He's in California. It's really early right now. So say hi to everybody, Austin.
Hey, how's it going? Good morning.
Yes, and before we get started with the show, Fluffy, I just want to give everybody an update on what's going on in Decred land. Give me one moment. And all right, there we go. Cool. So first, I just want to talk about the first proof of work, the first vote, the hard fork vote that we had just completed. And we have roughly 9 days until the hard fork activates on the network automatically. So if you have not upgraded to the latest version of the software, I think it's at least has to be released 1.0, and I think we're up to like 1.05 now. Please upgrade, otherwise you will be booted off the network, and then come July 9th, 10th, depending on when it lands, when that block hits. So yeah, other stuff to talk about. We have Charlie Lee actually coming on the episode, doing an episode with us on July 10th. Austin will also be co-hosting with me. And happy 4th of July, everybody. And yeah, so today we have Riccardo Spagni from, or also known as FluffyPony from Monero. And here's Austin's Twitter handle. You can find him at One Way Function and Riccardo at FluffyPony on Twitter. So yeah. All right. So hey, Riccardo, how's it going?
Good,
so
thanks.
maybe you could do a brief introduction on you know, how you're involved in crypto.
Sure. So hi, I'm Riccardo. You may know me as FluffyPony. So yeah, I've been involved in the crypto space, the cryptocurrency space since early 2011. Initially, obviously with Bitcoin, and then I discovered later on this cool thing called Tenebricks, which some people may have heard of. And then Tenebricks begat Fairbricks. And then I was like, Fairbricks is so much better because it doesn't have like the scammy miner. And then Fairbricks didn't really work out, and Fairbricks begat Litecoin. So, you know, like I sort of, my involvement predates that, which is, it's nice because I've seen a lot of stuff go up, a lot of stuff go down. I've seen a lot of people make good decisions and a lot of people make stupid decisions. I've made terrible decisions and a couple of good ones. So, and in all of it, I've learned a lot. And I've learned about what makes Bitcoin special, and, you know, in the process sort of discovered and met a bunch of interesting people. And I'm really grateful for that. And yeah, like, I mean, apart from sort of the companies that I have, my wife and I started an import-export company, and I also have a couple of fintech companies. Most of my time, not most of my time, but yeah, well, actually it is most. A good sort of 60% of my time is spent on Monero. I'm the lead maintainer, and I'm also a pro-privacy advocate. So I go talk at conferences, not just about Monero, but about the need for privacy and the right to privacy in general.
Awesome. So in your involvement prior to Bitcoin, did you do any sort of dev involvement you know, in the earlier days of Bitcoin, or get involved in that regard, or are you primarily, I guess, you know, what's that involvement kind of been?
So yeah, like right at the beginning when I discovered Bitcoin, my earliest reaction was this is nonsense and can never work, which is not an unfamiliar reaction. There are a lot of really strong technical people who's, you know, that was sort of like their first opinion, and so I spent a lot of time trying to figure out why it worked, at least why it worked at the time, a very small, relatively closed circle. Obviously, like like I did the other thing that everyone always does, which is mining. It was like, mining, this is a way to make free money. Let's play around with that. Turns out it isn't a way to make free money. It's mostly a way to like throw money at equipment that you're never going to use. But I learned a lot along the way about the dynamics of mining, and sort of discovered a lot and learned a lot about how miners interact with the network from I guess from a sort of game theoretic or incentive perspective. And what's interesting is a lot of the stuff that I learned then, and a lot of the stuff that I theorized might happen, like with cabals of miners and and how mining pools change things and so on. We're seeing a lot of that now come out with the whole sort of Bitcoin scaling debate, and with the way miners are attempting to figure out what the market actually wants and then play into that. So it's been an interesting voyage of discovery. But yeah, initially it was sort of like, let's hack away at the code base a little bit and let's do the mining thing. I must, like early 2011, I was paranoid that because Bitcoin was clearly in a sense, a subversive technology. I mean, like not that subversive, but it was subversive enough that I was paranoid that there was going to be like a knock on my door, and like cops were going to be kicking down the door going like, oh my God, you worked on Bitcoin and we're arresting you. And it took me a while. I think it took me like probably 2 years before I calmed down, maybe a year and a half, before I sort of realized that actually no one was going to come kick down my door. But yeah, that the first while was sort of intense paranoia and using Tor, which at the time was not quite as matured as it is now, and just sort of like constantly panicking and like, encrypt everything because someone's going to come kick my door down tomorrow just for like looking at the source code.
Using Bitcoin. Wow. Yeah. So now, and our devs with Decredder, man, they're the most paranoid people I've ever met. But and now you're kind of heavily involved in Monero, and obviously it seems like you're a Bitcoin advocate. I'm also a Bitcoin advocate. I think most everybody in the space, even as much as some people are involved in altcoins, should all be advocates for Bitcoin, because it's what gives value to almost everything in our industry right now. So, but you got involved in Monero. So I guess, maybe you could talk a little bit about what is Monero, and then, how the story of your involvement behind the project kind of came about, and the history of it.
Sure. So Monero is a pro-privacy cryptocurrency. It endeavors to provide privacy by default for all its users, and that takes various forms. We aim to hide the amount that's transacted, where the transaction is coming from, and where the transaction is going to. And those three already work. And then a fourth thing that we're working on is hiding the originating IP address of transactions. Obviously, sort of part of being a pro-privacy project is deciding how private it needs to be. Because with privacy, especially in cryptocurrencies, you almost have a spectrum. You've got obviously Bitcoin, which we would consider on the weaker end of the spectrum because it has very weak privacy claims. In fact, it doesn't try very hard to be private. And then, you can go all the way up the spectrum to very strong privacy, which can be achieved through something like Zcash stocks, where you don't even have a trusted setup. The problem with all of these things, and with sort of gauging where you want to be on the spectrum, is that the higher up the spectrum you go, the less likely people are to use it because it's processor intensive, or transactions take a few minutes to compute. And obviously, the further down you go, the stronger the scalability, because transactions are cheaper to compute and so on. And so with Monero, what we decided was to sort of peg ourselves near the top, but not high up enough on that scale so that it would be impossible for people to use, or that it would completely be impossible to scale. So there's some inherent scalability. Transactions are pretty fast, and all transactions are private. You can't sort of opt out of that and create a non-private transaction, even though you used to be able to do that in the early days. Now, having said that, I'm not the person that launched Monero. I'm not the person that created Monero. It was originally launched by a guy called Thankful for Today on Bitcoin Talk. It was a pretty fair launch. He pre-announced it. He made sure there were binaries available for various operating systems. All of that was good. There was some dodginess because he had there was crippled mining code in there. But I don't think he really, I think he underestimated the influx of people who would be interested in mining. So despite the crippled miner, he only had maybe 5% of the mining power, because there were so many people that were crazy about this new thing. It wasn't based on Bitcoin's code. It presented this brand new, interesting technology to hack away at. And so I mined it pretty much from day zero, from launch. And I thought it was really interesting and cool, but as a sort of Bitcoin maximalist, I was like, well, I'm going to mine this, and when the minute it hits Mintpel or Cryptsy, because like these are obviously the major exchanges at the time, the minute it hits those two, I'm going to dump. And that was my plan. Needless to say, it did eventually hit an exchange. It hit Poloniex, and I dumped a bunch. And I still have a small portion from my original mining stash. But at the beginning, I had no real sort of faith in the project's longevity. It was just this interesting thing. And something that happened very early on, within a few weeks, is Thankful for Today became impossible to work with. We were already this burgeoning community. We wanted to do this and write that and do the other. And Thankful for Today suddenly came up with this crazy idea of making Monero merge mined with Bitcoin. And the community as a whole went like, no, not going to happen. So he put it to a mining vote. Even with that, it was like super dodgy the way he did it. But eventually the mining vote ended up being no, we don't want to be merge mined with Bitcoin. And Thankful for Today turned around and said, well, I don't really care. We're going to do that anyway. And that was the point at which we realized, as a community, this is not the sort of person we're going to be able to work with. So myself and six others forked the code away from him, and the community followed us. And so suddenly, 7 of us had an altcoin, even though that wasn't our intention. And we were largely Bitcoin maximalists. So we were like, oh crap, what do we do now? We have an altcoin, and we don't really know what we're doing. So that doesn't really help either. And we're not familiar with the code, and there are no comments in it. And we're not familiar with the cryptography. So and there's no GUI, and there's not even mining pool software. So we really have no idea what we're doing. And this is like square zero. This is really start from the beginning. Like, how do you write a mining pool for a new cryptocurrency? How do you even go about creating a GUI? These it's just crazy, the amount of stuff that we had to get through. Oh, and then my favorite, the blockchain was all kept in RAM. There was no database for the blockchain. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, so we got to a point where the blockchain was about 8 gigs in memory, just on 8 gigs in memory, and we had to drop 32-bit support because no Windows 32-bit machines had more than 8 gigs of RAM. So that was the end of that. Yeah, so that was my journey.
So it was like, and I think I heard you say this before. It's like showing up with a baby on your doorstep, and you're kind of just like.
Yeah, and you sort of go, okay. Oh, and my favorite part is we didn't know each other. There were 7 of us that we'd I sort of peripherally knew some of the names from Bitcoin Talk and RSC and whatever, but we weren't friends. So we didn't even know if we could trust each other. Now we're suddenly having to share passwords and stuff. And yeah, it's like having this baby dumped on your doorstep, and it's like, so you and 6 strangers have to raise it. And you're like, okay.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people in the Monero community are really glad that you got involved in that. And it seems to be going really well. Monero, in my opinion, is probably one of the most legitimate projects out there. You know, I mean, you guys have no sort of dev tax or anything, and seems like a very fair launch, and so many things going right for it, and it continues to have this path forward. And I think I've seen some of your other talks where, you know, the amount of contributors and your GitHub repo keep growing, and transaction volume is growing, and a lot of other things which are really good for, you know, everything on the Monero front. You know, I guess to talk about the next thing, one of the next things that I was really interested in is, so I guess you guys, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys hard fork about every 6 months.
Yeah.
And what's kind of the governance mechanism that I guess leads to that hard fork?
Sure. So I guess our governance mechanism is that we basically have no governance. Very strong governance mechanism. No, we basically we rely on loose consensus. So everything's open. Nothing's done behind closed doors. We never present decisions that have already been made to the community. We always take a long time to make decisions, and we talk about it. You know, we might already in our head have decided that this is a good idea, but we still talk about it with the community as a group of developers, with you know, people that are non-technical and with people that are technical, with researchers in the Monero Research Lab. We discuss these things over and over and over again, so that by the time it actually ends up becoming a thing, the community as a whole has agreed to that. There are always going to be fringe elements,
Gotcha.
People who don't really follow these discussions, who don't read, you know, the notes from the dev meetings, who don't follow Reddit, whatever. But ultimately, like by sort of discussing the stuff in as many places as possible, we end up with a reasonable idea of, you know, is there consensus or not. In terms of the actual, I mean, like typically with hard forks, we don't put anything in there that we think would even remotely be you know, the people would treat with sort of skepticism, or that would be contentious in any way. We only put stuff in that by and large the community has agreed to, and that the dev group definitely has agreed to. And we have quite a big group of contributors, so getting the dev group to agree to anything can sometimes take several meetings. But at any rate, once we've decided that something's going to go into a hard fork, one of the other things that we do is we try and reach out to as many of the economically sensitive nodes as possible. So exchanges, services, that sort of thing. Have a discussion with them as well, and take that back to the community if they present any issues. So, you know, oh, okay, well, this is going to add this load to their system, and they can't really afford that. Let's take it back to the community and say, like, well, we've spoken to whoever, Poloniex and Bitfinex and Kraken and Shapeshift, and they all agree that this is a bad idea. You know, like having those discussions are important too, and then figuring out how best to proceed. And what we found is once we have that sort of general buy-in and everyone's happy, then we're able to basically just set a flag day, and we go, okay, cool. On this flag day, we're switching over to the next block version, and then somebody will go and normally a guy called the Brain will go and create a thread on Reddit, and he'll list all of the economically sensitive nodes and the pools in a table, and then you'll be able to see, okay, cool, these pools have upgraded, these ones haven't. And leading up to the actual flag day, you can go, oh, I'm mining on that pool, but they haven't upgraded, so I'm going to switch to another one. You know, and you sort of know upfront, cool, this is what's happening. And and we haven't really had issues. Invariably, sometimes there's like one pool that gets left behind, and then like a day later, they're like, oh, all our blocks are getting orphaned. Oh dear, maybe we should have followed the email we got and upgraded. But yeah, generally speaking, it's most of them have been pretty smooth. And yeah, we haven't had sort of major issues because we haven't been putting anything contentious in.
Yeah, and I think it's hard for any chain to realize the issues that might arise until you have something contentious that we're seeing in the Bitcoin scaling debate. So yeah. What's involved in the next hard fork that's coming up in September?
Well, We'll see. We haven't quite finalized things. We're hoping. I mean, we basically have to, by the middle of August, have a code freeze, barring sort of last-minute fixes and that sort of thing. And so we're now sitting end of June. So we've got about a 45-day window, and we have one of the things that we're hoping to get in before the hard fork is multisig. The implementation for that is sitting in a PR at the moment, in a pull request, and it just needs a bunch of review. So hopefully, barring any issues that arise from the reviews of the cryptography and reviews of the code, we should have multisig in the September hard fork. Beyond that, I can't think of any. There's like a sub-address scheme that we've got as well, where you'll be able to create like throwaway addresses or single-use addresses, and that's something that is already implemented. Pull request has been merged. It does need a sort of final pass on the crypto, but that cryptography has been discussed like, ad infinitum. So we're pretty confident in it, and in the actual implementation. It's also not a very complicated scheme. So yeah, those are the two big things that we're expecting in the September hard fork. But it's an open source project, so who knows? Maybe in the next 45 days, someone comes and adds something amazing, like, I don't know, rich statefulness.
Oh man, okay. Well, I think Austin has a couple questions now.
Yeah. So I'm interested. I was it earlier this year, earlier this month. There was this image vulnerability, and I'm wondering if you could talk about that. Like, what was it? What other coins were affected by it? If I remember correctly, it was most crypto note-based currencies were susceptible. If you could talk about the pre-image bug that happened and give the listeners maybe an idea of what that was.
Sure. So one of the things that we have in Monero is this thing called a key image. And basically what happens is when you create a ring signature in Monero for transactions input, that ring signature appears to sign several older transactions, or a bunch of old transactions. And there's this thing called a key image. And the key image basically it represents the real signature, but you can't like reverse it to figure out what the real signature is. So that's a way to prevent double spends, because obviously if you didn't have this key image thing, you could just go and spend from the same transaction over and over, and the network wouldn't be able to validate whether or not you're genuinely spending from it or not. And so this obviously is a fantastic protection, a great mechanism. It's based on a research paper that where a researcher discovered or invented a scheme to do something called traceable ring signatures. So even though an external observer looks at the ring signature and can't figure out who is the true signer, this traceable component allows validation that the same signer hasn't, or the same signer hasn't signed again. Right. So that's obviously critical to Monero's use. Now, the problem with the key image exploit basically exploited the fact that we use curve 25519 and specifically the ED 25519 signature scheme, and it's basically like exploited a sort of subgroup, a small subgroup in that signature. And effectively what that meant was you could create a valid key image multiple times for the same valid signature. So you're signing from a particular transaction, and because the small order subgroup is different, you've got a different key image to an external observer, even though it's spending from the same transaction. So the net effect of that would be that you could quadruple spend an output.
Wow.
Yeah, which is effectively coins out of thin air. So in the discovery, we were like, oh dear, how do we fix this? Because, well, I mean, fixing it is easy, but our first sort of panic was, how do we make sure that this hasn't been exploited? But that was easy. You just add the subgroup check-in, and then you just sync from scratch.
Right.
That's literally the easiest way to check. And it checks every single transaction. None of them break that, so we're like, cool, we haven't been exploited. Next problem is we have to sneak the patch in, because if we go public with it, it'll be exploited. So we have to sneak the patch in. We have to get economically sensitive nodes and mining pools to upgrade. And we need to do all of this without alerting anyone that can attack other crypto node coins, because this isn't like a Monero specific thing, like a problem with Ring CT. This is a problem in the crypto node protocol in general. So the first thing we did is we created a point release, and we let mining pools and economically sensitive nodes know that they really should upgrade, on the basis that there was improved Ring CT validation code, which there was. The Ring CT validation was much faster. And so we said there's a small risk of denial of service attack, and which is true. You know, you could, I mean, it would be very difficult because of the asymmetry, but, you know, you could ostensibly have a denial of service attack with the slower validation code. And so then we got mining pools to upgrade, we got economically sensitive nodes to upgrade. Then we were fairly confident that enough of the network had upgraded, but we weren't 100% sure, and there was still, you know, you could still have like node isolation attacks and that. So we basically sat on it until a hard fork that we were going to sit until September, but then we had to have a sort of emergency hard fork in April because of an issue with our dynamic block size algorithm. And we had a transaction backlog that wasn't clearing because of this issue. So we had this emergency hard fork, and now we were certain that the entire network had upgraded. And that was the point at which we could then go to other crypto node coins and say, so here's the issue, please go and fix it. We gave them 4 weeks to fix. We went to CryptoNote and Bitcoin first. So we gave them just a little bit of lead time, because obviously CryptoNote, as the creators of the protocol and as the guys running Bitcoin, we sort of figured they probably would need to know about it first. Gave them a little bit of lead time, and then contacted the rest of the CryptoNote currencies after the hard fork and let them know. And then at the end of 4 weeks, we published it. And we had a pre-commitment in the blockchain, so everyone could sort of see when we discovered it and so on. And we thought that was kind of the best way to disclose it. You know, unironically, I guess, there are a bunch of cryptocurrencies that by that point still hadn't fixed it, despite having detailed instructions and being able to look at how some of the other ones had fixed it and just grabbing that and, like, you know, I mean, it's like a 3-line change. This is not complicated stuff. But yeah, I mean, the fact that some of them hadn't upgraded is pretty shocking.
Yeah. Are they all upgraded now, as far as you're aware?
I think some of the bulk of them are. There's still a few that are largely unmaintained that haven't upgraded, but they all, like some of them don't even have, like, you can't even sync up from scratch. Their seed nodes aren't working, so I guess it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Well, if they're listed on exchanges, I would like to know which ones they are. So that brings me to, we can make sure that they're not listed on exchanges anymore, because they won't be worth anything.
Exactly.
It brings me to a little short discussion I want to have about something I've been interested in. I've noticed it with pretty much all privacy-preserving cryptocurrencies, at least ones that are implemented so far. There seems to be this trade-off with privacy and the ease, or even sometimes ability, to audit the monetary base. In particular, when you hide amounts. I mean, there are other conditions under which you have this problem, but certainly when you hide amounts, you can no longer do like a direct audit of the monetary base, right? You can't just like sum the UTXO set.
Yeah.
So instead, we sort of do this indirect audit, right? Where with every transaction that you output, it comes along with this proof, or sometimes multiple proofs, that no new coins have been created. It's like a proof of a negative, right? And so as long as we verify, okay, we verified that no new coins have been created, so then we sort of just we assume that, okay, if this is true, then the monetary base is sound. That means that our faith in the soundness of the monetary base is only as strong as our faith in the verifiers of those proofs. And so if there's a bug in the verifier, which there has been a couple times in a handful of these currencies, then sometimes that bug can be exploited and people can then mint coins, and then no one knows until the bug's found. It's not all the toxic waste in Zcash being used would be a counterexample, but in most cases, once you find the bug, you can then check to see whether it's been exploited, like this happened most recently, right? And then you can, of course, just go through all the transactions since the beginning of your Genesis block till now and see if it's been exploited. And if it has, then you have to decide whether or not you want to roll back your blockchain or not, right? If you want to pull an Ethereum, basically, or if you want to eat it. And yeah. I was wondering if you could speak to, well, for example, with this latest bug or any other previous bugs that affected CryptoNote that you patched, and even with your doing due diligence and telling other, which is nice of you, telling other coins about the vulnerability. Very responsible disclosure, by the way. There are people who would not have done that as well. Are you aware of any? Are you aware of any coins that where coins were minted? Did they decide to roll back the blockchain, or did they decide to just sort of eat that loss publicly, like as a community?
Yeah, two cryptocurrencies were exploited: Bitcoin and XDM, digital notes or whatever. I don't know what they're called. But yeah, like with both of them, they only have the check after a certain block height. So that's kind of a dead giveaway that something's dodgy. And you just remove the block height check and you can see exactly where it suddenly fails. And we published details about the Bitcoin one. The XDN one, you know, I mean, like syncing up from scratch is super difficult because their seed nodes don't work. But still, like they've been exploited. You know, with both of those, the community is too small, I think, for them to not have rolled back. At least that's sort of, you know, in my opinion, or at least to have blacklisted the outputs that have been created from ever being used again.
Oh, you could. Okay, yeah. I was wondering if that was even possible with CryptoNote.
Yeah, yeah. You can blacklist them. They can't be used in a ring, whether they're being spent legitimately or not.
Right. It's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, yeah.
Yeah. If ever an output was, I mean, like that to me would be, would probably be the most suitable approach to a situation like that. You know, it depends again. Like if you discover it 6 months later and those outputs have been used in hundreds of transactions, well, what are you going to do? But if they haven't, blacklist them immediately, and then at least, like, you know, at least you can sort of move on. And the only loss are the coins that they spent creating the fake ones, and that's their loss to eat, not yours.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No kidding.
Anyway, look, I mean, you're 100% right, though. I mean, it's like that sort of that scale of privacy that I spoke about earlier. It does seem that the higher up the scale you get, the harder it becomes to audit the monetary base. With RingCT, we're kind of fortunate that that the ability to audit things like commitment arithmetic, you know, that stuff's reasonably solid. It's not a new scheme. It's not something that like was suddenly created. So we've at least got a reasonable amount of confidence, not only in the cryptography, but also in the implementation, because it's simple. I think the more complex you get and the closer you get to ZK snarks and ZK stocks, the more difficult it is, because you start getting into maths and into cryptography that is not as old. And obviously you still have the implementation risk even over and above that. And then with ZK snarks, you've got that trusted setup issue where your monetary base relies on a bunch of people not colluding.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and the implementation of the ZK Snark's verifier is much more complex than just checking these range proofs.
Or
yeah, I think as well. Like I don't know if you know about was it Zcoin, whatever they're called. They also had an implementation issue that was exploited, and coins were created out of thin air.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they use the zero coin protocol instead of the zero cash protocol. Yeah. And if memory
Ah.
serves, I think they just ate it, and I think that those monetary base expands and off you go instead of reversing it, which is, I guess, a fair decision to make as well, given the complexity. And that's all you can do.
Yeah, exactly. You could fall in. I mean, this decision, and no matter which one you choose, it's gonna suck.
Yeah.
Really. I want to move to,
well, you almost feel like rewarders. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, which I mean, if they're adding value by coming up with these exploits, obviously they're not publishing them, but they are showing that, hey, this can happen. I don't know. In a sense, I kind of feel like maybe it should be rewarded, but.
Yeah, but they're really writing their own reward.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah. Well, so this is one of the things where it becomes really complex. Like and not like when something gets hacked, when an exchange gets hacked, invariably, like, because it's happened so often, or when someone claims that their coins got stolen or whatever, invariably I sit there and I sort of I say to myself, like, very quietly, I wonder if that really happened. Or I wonder if it's just like, oh, my coins were stolen. Oh, yeah. And they just sort of send it to themselves. And like, that becomes a lot easier with a currency like Monero, where you can just, claim your stuff got stolen all the time and just send it to yourself. And I look at that and I think to myself, now imagine you discovered an exploit in your own currency. I mean, exploit it to create a bunch of coins and then go, oh dear, we discovered an exploit. This is so terrible. You say.
Yeah. So, sorry,
as far as scalability, oh yeah, go for it.
Oh, no, I was segueing into you.
Good. Oh, okay, good. Yeah. So I was going to talk about scalability, and if you could talk about, for example, like I guess you could start with like how big are Monero transactions versus like Bitcoin transactions? Are you facing any scalability problems? If not, do you see any on the horizon? And do you have any plans for addressing scalability if it becomes an issue?
Yeah, I mean, Monero transactions are physically significantly larger than Bitcoin's. With Ring CT, it's even worse. I mean, we're talking about orders of magnitude larger. Obviously, the solution is just to increase the block size. That solves everything I've heard. No, like realistically, there's some things that we're doing. We are decreasing the size of the range proofs. We have a scheme to do that, and that will have a pretty big impact. At the same time, you decrease the size of the range proofs, but you also want to increase the network enforced minimum number of transactions that you use in a ring signature. So at the moment, the minimum is quite low, it's 3 or 4. And obviously, we want it to be significantly higher, because the higher that baseline, the more private transactions are. And pretty much, I mean, like, let's be honest, 80% of the network, or 90% of the network use the default. So like raising that minimum is obviously quite critical, but doing so with the current range proof size would just be ludicrous. So that's, decrease range proofs and then increase the minimum sort of privacy level. And that's sort of step one in terms of I mean, it won't be a sort of linear switch, but it will be a decrease in size. So that's definitely a step towards improving scalability. We have this dynamic block size algorithm, which is really handy because we can obviously scale on chain, but it's also really dangerous because we don't want to have a scenario where I don't know, Monero suddenly has a bunch of use and Next minute, we have 200 megabyte blocks. That's not ideal. So in order to circumvent that, one of the things that we're trying to do is after multisig and along with multisig really is make sure that we're able and ready to support things like Tumblebit and Lightning. And by doing so, we're hoping to be able to offload transactions to layer 2 sooner rather than later. The sooner we can support that, the better it is, because it means that there'll be less transactions on main chain. So that's sort of, where something like Bitcoin, one could argue that Lightning is semi-optional, or at least it can be added later or whatever. With Monero, Lightning's pretty critical. We don't survive without it, and similar technologies. The other thing that we've been looking at for a while, and this is, I would imagine post Lightning and post when we've done the low, or we've grabbed the low-hanging fruit, is stuff like Mimblewimble and scriptless scripts and some of the stuff that's being worked on in that space. What we'd like to really do is perhaps have a side chain, or some sort of chain that's that runs in parallel. And the idea is that if you're running a full node and you make a payment to one of these sidechain addresses, then the swap that happens or the sort of movement from main chain to sidechain happens invisibly. You don't care about it, and the recipient receives the funds. And then similarly, if somebody pays you from that sidechain, then sort of the movement back onto main chain is invisible. And then if you're paying sidechain to sidechain or main chain to main chain, obviously that works as normal. And the sort of idea would be that, you take something like Mimblewimble, then you could have people running full nodes on their phone, but still being able to pay normal Monero addresses because it gets pegged back into main chain. How we would guarantee the sort of main chain security on those lightweight nodes is something that's currently up for discussion, but that would sort of be the general idea.
That's interesting. Yeah, I want to follow that, see what progress you make. That's a really interesting idea.
Yeah, so that hopefully provides an entire lightweight sort of subset of the network that's still able to talk to. It still effectively is main chain. It's just a separate sort of side chain. And I think that's really the only way, because there's weaker privacy claims, obviously, with Mimblewimble, but fantastic scalability. So then it's like, well, you can still transact using Monero, just pick and choose whether you want to run the lightweight chain or the big chain.
Yeah.
Is it possible to, can you do like tree pruning and stuff like that? Or is that even possible in Monero? I imagine it would be harder.
Yeah, it'll be significantly harder. There's, scaling main chain is ugly. There's no sort of quick win. There's a lot of stuff that we can throw away on a prune node. I mean, a prune node can throw away whatever, signatures and range proofs and so on. So I mean, a pruned node can run pretty lightweight. The other thing a prune node can do, because it does need to keep the TXO set for mixing, for creating ring signatures, but it can just keep a subset of the TXO set. It can just say, like, let me go and select 10% of the transactions randomly. Yeah. And then I've got a bunch of transactions to mix with. So that's also, there are ways to run a lighter node. At this point in time, the space requirements of Monero don't really mean that we have to have that. But yeah, definitely at some point in the near future, it might make sense for us to do, like, a pruning level that is quite heavy-handed, and you're just keeping a subset of the TXOs that you need for creating your transactions.
Yeah, that's interesting. Cool. I'm definitely going to be following that. The whole scalability thing is really interesting, and scaling private currencies is even harder.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so it's going to be an interesting few next years. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Matt, you have a question here about
And
announcement consensus?
so are you guys planning on, or will you be able to support Lightning Network?
Yeah, multi-sig's kind of the big, the big stepping stone. Yeah, once we have multi-sig and we've done whatever other fiddly bits we need, then we're hoping to bolt onto Lightning sort of as is, which means that we will get cross-chain atomic swaps between Monero and Litecoin, which will be pretty cool.
That'll be awesome. And we need some cross-chain atomic swaps between Decred and Monero in the future too.
Yeah, once we're all on Lightning, it's going to make that a whole lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big advocate for Lightning Network, and I think there's a lot of cool things that people haven't even conceived yet that can be done. So do you have any more questions, Austin?
That's all I have for now. If you want to grab the next few, I have some kick the hornets questions about what Riccardo thinks about other cryptocurrencies. We can save those till later.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm looking forward to those. Yeah, so I've noticed that you've kind of been a big advocate for speaking against the ICO hype going on, which I feel like we need more people like that in the space. I mean, just, I don't know. I was wondering, maybe you could talk about your feelings about what's going on in the space right now with all these ICOs and tokens and whatnot. Most of these aren't even chains themselves. It may or may not be a good thing, but kind of your opinions on that sort of thing.
Sure. My opinions are reasonably well known. When someone does an ICO, my default is it's a scam until proven otherwise. And I don't mean it's literally a scam. I don't mean that they're literally like bad people trying to scam people. It's just I'm not against the tokenization of securities. If you want to issue a token instead of a share certificate, no problem. What I am against is using it as a way to sidestep basically like the I guess the protocols that have been put in place for the protection of investors. And this is not to say that I'm saying like, oh, I love the SEC or I love the legal system around this. As somebody who's raised VC money multiple times, it's frustrating, it's challenging, it takes a long time. There are no shortcuts. You have to justify everything. And then when you actually get given the VC money, they don't give you the VC money and off you go. They give you the VC money and then you're like reporting back all the time. Like, oh, we spent 10 cents on that for the following reason. You're justifying things the whole time. You don't just get to make random decisions. Even if you are a self-titled, self-fashioned CEO. And that at least, despite the hype that goes on in Silicon Valley and the amount of VC funds that get thrown at stupid ideas in Silicon Valley, at least the protocols and the way things are designed and the way VCs give money and all that, at least it just sort of forces people to become better business leaders. Because right now what we've got is we've got a system where a bunch of 16-year-olds can write a white paper that has like no real content, they have no idea how they're going to bring it to market. They've got no experience in running actual businesses, and they're able to raise $15 million plus $100 million. That frightens me because like it's not like the market is rational enough to only give money to, like, oh, well, I've looked at the team, I've done my due diligence, and these are people who have a track record of delivery and are being able to bring things to market successfully. It's like, well, their website looks kind of cool, and I'll be able to flip the ICO token for like double. So I'm invested. Like we've got a completely irrational marketplace that has no idea how to do due diligence. We've got in fact, we've created a marketplace where due diligence is almost frowned on because, heaven forbid you point out the issues and you point out how broken the idea is, or how pointless having a token is, or whatever, you just get shot down in a sea of like, oh, that's FUD. And so we've created terrible disincentives for people that are willing and able to speak out against bad ideas, through no fault of our own. I mean, don't get me wrong. I throw money at ICOs all the time and flip them for double. You know, like, I'm part of the problem. I'm not averse to making money, and I'm just sort of like hoping that this explodes sooner than later, because if this continues, I feel like it's going to get really ugly, and that's not great. I feel like we are basically we're inviting attention to an industry that is extremely young, an industry that is in its infancy, technology that's in its infancy, and we're inviting all the wrong kind of attention. We're inviting attention from scammers. We're inviting attention from the wrong type of regulators that want to shut this down because, look, you cost grandma her money and her inheritance, I mean, her pension, and how could you? That's terrible. So, you know, I look at that and I think to myself, maybe an explosion sooner rather than later is a good thing, because even if we go into crypto winter for 5 years, it will mean that that less idiotic ICOs come up, and it will mean that whatever's left after crypto winter will be something that's worth taking a look at and playing around with.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's almost like we're becoming the multi-level marketing industry, the new industry. Yep. And we're attracting a lot of those people, and it's just,
oh yeah.
And it's so much easier for these people to go out and sell and get, you know, direct benefits of people buying, because some of these coins and tokens are probably not going to have very much liquidity. So seeing their price get pushed around 50% in a day is just, I mean, we've seen it, you know, with plenty of tokens and coins. I don't know, it's really scary to me. I feel like, and I, you know, as much as, you know, you were saying you still invest in some of these ICOs, I've had such a problem like doing it. I think the only one I've really invested in recently was Civic, and mainly because, you know, they're out of Palo Alto. I have a little bit of trust in Vinny Lingham, and you know, but still, I'm just like, you know, why, you know, to you, like your point, why don't we just go down the traditional VC route? Like, what do these people really have to hide?
I can tell you why they don't go down the traditional VC route. Because if they pitched up at a VC and they were like, well, we have a white paper, the VC would like laugh them out the door. Like they wouldn't even make it, like they wouldn't even make it into a meeting. Forget about like actually sort of being able to pitch their product. And yet all they need is a slick website and a bunch of hype, and now they're pitching their product to how many people?
Yeah, I've been tempted to do it myself. I can make a pretty website. Like, you know, millions of people are throwing millions of dollars at these people who have no previous experience, that haven't written a line of code. Their white papers aren't even technically interesting.
No, their white papers don't even present the business case. Their white paper just reads like a marketing document.
Yeah, and a lot of them are marketers. I think they're going to be among the most successful.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a mess. It's not gonna be pretty. It's not gonna be pretty. It's gonna be fun to watch.
Oh yeah,
there'll be a lot of.
I'm investing in popcorn futures. I don't know. Maybe we should have like a popcorn ICO.
Totally. No kidding.
All right. Well, I really appreciate your thoughts on that, and you know, I hope that people watching, you know, do have some of these same thoughts, because, you know, what's really going on is it's just not good. But anyways, you know, moving on, and this kind of goes back to Monero governance. I guess what I'm wondering is, so how do you guys decide like what to work on? And I believe you guys kind of do a donation-based funding, which is, I think, is really cool. I was wondering if maybe you could talk about Like how do you guys decide what you're going to work on next, and how do you guys raise funds for the developers to do it?
Sure. So everyone decides on what they want to work on. I mean, it's an open source project. Like I can, in a meeting, for example, make suggestions, and I can be like, oh, we need this thing done. And I can ask someone, I can be like, hey, Monero, do you mind doing this? And, you know, if he's interested, he'll do it. If he's not, he'll be like, no, someone else can. So, you know, I guess the closest analogy to that is Kanban. It's kind of like a Kanban model. There's a bunch of stuff that needs to be done, and anyone can come and pick it up and do it. And I guess probably the best example of that is we have our own implementation of compact blocks called Fluffy Blocks. I didn't name it. But basically what happened was I'd spoken a little, I can't even remember where. I think I wrote on Stack Exchange. Might have been Stack Exchange or Reddit or something. I wrote about how cool compact blocks was and how easy it is to do something like that, and how useful it would be to do that in Monero. And I was like, cool, you know, like at some point I need to write this up a little bit more formally, and then, you know, like maybe in a couple of years we'll get to it, because it's not super critical. And then, like, I don't know, like 6 months later, someone submitted a pull request, and they're like, well, this is an initial implementation of compact blocks that Fluffy wrote about on Stack Exchange, and we're calling it Fluffy Blocks. And I was just like, what? This came out of nowhere. No, like, I didn't even know he was working on this. It's like, I think this was like his second contribution to the project, you know? And that came out the blue. So really, like, you know, that wasn't like on a roadmap. That wasn't like in a GitHub issue. He just pitched up one day, read the thing on Stack Exchange, and he was like, cool, I'm going to do this. So we get a lot of that. That kind of happens all the time, which is great. And beyond that, yeah, like, I mean, there's a general sense of what we want to accomplish amongst the sort of dev group. There are open GitHub issues, and sometimes people pitch up and say, hey, I want to help. And we point them to open GitHub issues. Sometimes people pitch up and say, I'm not a C developer or C++ developer, but I'm a Java developer. And then we point them to Coinomy, because Coinomy are busy adding Monero integration, and they needed a Java developer. You know, so we have that. People pitch up, and if they know different languages, we can point them at projects that other people have started that need help. But by and large, everyone just like works on what they want to work on. You know, which is nice, really. It does mean that sometimes there's underlying stuff that that I would like to see worked on, like replacing the wire protocol with ZMTP. That's something that I've wanted someone to tackle for a while. And I have a lack of time to sort of tackle it myself. I spend a ton of time reviewing pull requests and not enough time writing code. And so, you know, that's like a little carrot out there. If anyone feels like digging into some C++ and doing that, please. But yeah, like, it will eventually get done. It just won't get done on some magic time frame that I have, which is why it's always funny when people come and pitch up and sort of expect timeframes or expect deliverables or expect dates. It's like, yeah, that's something we want to do, but it'll be done when somebody decides to pick it up and do it, not before then. And people do things in their own time frame and based on their own schedule. By and large, the bulk of the contributors work because they believe in Monero, and they work on Monero unpaid. And that's a pretty big group of developers, some of which spend an inordinate amount of time working on Monero. Like, literally, they leave their day jobs and they work on Monero in the evenings and on weekends for no pay. That's amazing. And then over and above that, we have a funding system, a crowdfunding system on the Monero forum. And that's been incredibly powerful, because we funded 2 full-time developers and 1 full-time researcher. So, you know, that's exciting. and then multiple part-time people as well. So like having that where that sort of setup where if the community believes something should happen, they throw money at it, is really powerful, because it means if someone comes along and says, I want to do this thing, and clearly can't, he can try raise money, but the community is not going to throw money at them. And so, it's sort of, it means that the stuff that really should get worked on as a matter of urgency does get worked on, because those people get funded really quickly. In fact, we've had a really nice problem recently, and that is a lack of crowdfunding proposals. Like, there aren't enough. When a crowdfunding proposal goes up, it gets funded in like 6 hours. And like, people wake up and they're like, oh, I missed it. I'm so irritated. There's nothing for me to throw money at. So, like that's a good problem to have. And I'm hoping that continues.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I think having a really strong community will speak so much more for the future of a currency than anything, especially with having people that are just willing to throw money and support the developers. And one thing I noticed looking at some of the crowdfunding proposals is they're relatively. I mean, the developers themselves don't ask for a ton of money. I mean, I think I saw the last one for Moo. $30. I mean, that's development world. That's, and especially in blockchain development world, that's like nothing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the crazy thing. You look at some of the ICOs and was it Bancor that after their ICO had raised the equivalent of $3.5 million per line of code or something like that.
Wow.
I don't know, it's something crazy like that. And you look at that and you're like, wow, okay, this is nuts. And then you've got like Monero developers who are like, well, $30 an hour. And I'm like, wow, that's a really low rate for a senior C++ dev.
Yeah.
Seriously. And I don't know, so Austin, do you wanna maybe ask your
the Hornet's Nest question? So I guess we could start with the other, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the two other like primary largest market cap these are Zcash and Dash, and I was wondering if you could talk about your opinions about them, and you can cover anything from what you think about their privacy guarantees, or to what you think about their culture, or what you think about whatever you want. So mostly your opinions on Zcash and Dash. While we're at it, let's kick around Ethereum too. And what do you think about? That's another one you can. You'd like.
You couldn't have picked 3 nicer currencies for me to comment on. Thanks, Austin. I see what this is. Okay, this is an ambush.
Not sure who's the ambush. Yeah.
By no means not meant to be an ambush.
I feel like I should crack open one of the bottles of wine before I start this.
Yeah, let's do it. Do it.
No, look, I think, look, the first thing is, and this is something that I tend to say quite often because nobody really pays attention when I do. When I comment on another cryptocurrency, I'm not trying to spread FUD. I'm not trying to move their price or, speak ill of people who work on it. I can be kind of cutting and snarky, especially on Twitter, but there are a lot of cryptocurrencies that I really like, and there are a lot of people working on cryptocurrencies where I might not even agree with the model, the funding model or whatever that the thing uses, but I have respect for them as individuals, or I have respect for the work they're doing. So it's not that I go around like slamming every cryptocurrency that isn't Monero, because that's something that people have claimed. That said, I think that there is a general lack of seriousness in this industry, and pragmatism, and I think that and probably the best sort of way to explain that is I look at some of the things that people are working on, And I asked myself, why are they working on it as a separate cryptocurrency? Why haven't they just submitted that feature as a pull request to Bitcoin? And the reason that they haven't is because they want to make money. And we all want to make money. But, you know, if you have something that is genuinely good and genuinely useful, and you have the ability to code it up, like, your first thought should be submit a pull request to Bitcoin, not fork Bitcoin and make money. And that's the fact that I've seen this over and over again is disappointing, because ultimately what we're ending up with is a marketplace that's unable to distinguish between good ideas and bad ideas, and a marketplace that hypes up cryptocurrencies and ICOs and whatever based on all sorts of stupid things, based on, you know, like whether it sounds like it's a good idea, not whether it actually is a good idea, not whether there's mathematical proofs that accompany the claims, the security claims of a particular cryptocurrency. They say things like, oh, the transactions are instant, the transactions are anonymous, the transactions are private, whatever. They make these claims, but they're not backed up by research. They're not backed up by a mathematical model. They're not making it. They don't even make these claims and say, under the following cryptographic model, this is true. They just state it. And I'm like, okay, you know, you're making a security claim, but where's your proof that that's true?
Yeah, or what even the threat model? Yeah, they don't.
Yeah, that's it.
That's
it. They don't talk about threat models. They don't talk about disincentives. There's none of that. There's no adversarial thinking. And the problem is when it's baby and when it's small and no one uses it, no problem, not an issue. Then, you know, have a test net and do your thing. But when it's big and people are throwing money at it, and people are starting to trust your claims of privacy or instant transactions or world computer or immutability or whatever your claims are, when people are starting to trust those claims and then everything collapses around them, the people with egg on their face are not going to be just the creators of that particular cryptocurrency. It's going to be me. I'm going to be the one who's advocated pro-privacy projects and advocated for cryptocurrencies in general. I'm going to be the one that looks like an idiot. I'm going to be the one that all my friends are going to turn around to and say, like, oh, bro, yeah, I hear your entire industry collapsed, you know? And they did. When the DAO thing happened, the DAO theft happened, I had people saying to me, like, oh, bro, yeah, your company went bankrupt. I was like, what? Yeah, you know that DAO thing? I hear your company went bankrupt. I was like, no, dude, it's not at all. Like no one, ordinary people don't have the ability to figure out, like, where my involvement with Bitcoin starts and ends, and where other people's involvement starts and ends. They think that I'm solely responsible. My non-technical friends think I'm solely responsible for Bitcoin, Ethereum, Monero, and everything else. They think I created Bitcoin. I got asked the other day, like, by one of my friends. He's like, bro, but like, I heard like the CEO of Bitcoin is Australian. Did they get that wrong because you're South African? I was like, what? No. No.
You know, that's Craig Wright.
Yeah, it's Craig Wright. So, like, you know, this is the problem, that when these bad ideas collapse, and they will collapse eventually under the weight of their own stupidity, then people that are trying to genuinely just work on things hopefully for the benefit of mankind are the ones that end up looking like idiots. And so that having been said, and you know, sort of having laid that groundwork, I do have issues with those three cryptocurrencies you mentioned. And I mean, I don't want to go into like oodles of detail, but, you know, Dash by and large is just a joke. I mean, honestly, you know, like if we thought that mining cabals were bad, I mean, just wait till masternode cabals start. I mean, it's the whole concept of masternodes is, again, like, it just flies in the face of trustlessness and of what anyone's trying to accomplish and achieve here. And then like beyond that, you again have these claims of instant transactions, private transactions, but backed up by what? When they do back up the claims of privacy by math, to use probability, which, you know, they go like, well, there are 6,000 master nodes. And so if your transaction goes to one of those 6,000 and another of those 6,000, then eventually, however many loops you jump through, it's like the power of 6,000. And that's sort of like the chance of it being, of it sort of decoded or the path being figured out, which is actually not incorrect. It's just that no attacker would go like, I'm going to run one master node and hope that you just hit me a bunch of times, and that's how I'm going to decrypt the path. I mean, attackers would do obvious things like infiltrate the VPS that you run on, because that's trivial because you're an idiot who has no idea how to secure your box. You know how to secure your box? Cool. Distributed denial of service to take you off the network so that no transactions can go through you. Or, you know, the other thing is there's a lack of liquidity. Because obviously this is CoinJoin. There's a lack of liquidity, so there's a lack of other people using the service when you want to use the service to mix. Well, okay, cool, no problem. What we're going to do is just set up a bunch of like Sybil hacks using liquidity that we own, and so then we can see the path because we own 99% of the liquidity in the mixing network. These are all obvious flaws. But the thing is, this gets battered down as no, that will never happen, or no, it can't happen because, you know, 8 to the power of 6,000 is the probability, and so I can't take something like that seriously where there's no genuine interest in analyzing various threat models and fixing them. Where when these issues are presented, they just get ignored or hand waved away, you know. When somebody presents a genuine issue with Monero, we look at it and we go like, that is a problem, how do we fix it? We don't hand wave stuff away. That's irresponsible. So putting that aside, then you have like Ethereum, where again, I don't fundamentally have a problem with the concept of smart contracts. Cool. You want to do smart contracts. You want to do machine-to-machine stuff. No problem. I get all of that. Why do all of them need to be executed by every computer in the world that's a node? You know, and now, instead of designing scaling from the beginning, it was like, well, let's first design a really crappy mechanism that doesn't scale, and then we'll use sharding. Sharding will fix everything. You know, I mean, it's like, oh God, it's like going backwards. And the other problem that Ethereum and Zcash have, which seems to be quite common the minute you've got people with comp sci degrees involved, because, like, you know, Dash is the exact opposite. No one with a STEM degree would touch it. And with Zcash and ETH, you've got people who genuinely are clever, genuinely do have comp sci degrees, and so then they have this problem, which is the not invented year syndrome. And so instead of going, cool, the way Bitcoin does things works, we're going to do the same thing, but then we're going to slowly modify piece by piece. They go, oh, let's throw out like this entire thing and do 12-second blocks. And let's also reward people who have orphan blocks, because that makes complete sense. And there couldn't possibly be an incentive to mine empty blocks and purposely have them orphaned. You know, like there's all this weird stuff that they do for no reason. There's no valid reason for it except that they have the not invented year syndrome. We must do things differently because Zcash killed off useful opcodes, at least one of them, for no reason other than like, you know, oh, we're killing opcodes randomly, so let's kill this one. And it's like I look at all this stuff and I think to myself again, you know, with Monero we're doing the exact opposite. We're like, okay, cool. So, you know, Bitcoin does this. I mean, and don't get me wrong, we do stuff very differently to Bitcoin in certain places. You know, we have infinite emission. That's completely different to Bitcoin. But I mean, we don't make changes like that for no reason. We're not doing it just to be different. You know, we take research papers that apply to Bitcoin, and then we like dissect them and see if they apply to Monero too. and then we apply the recommended changes. We've just done that with anchor connections and white and black and gray list connections to peers to reduce the risk of node isolation attacks based on a paper that applies to Bitcoin, because we're not trying to do things that are so like crazy and vastly different. We're just trying to do a Bitcoin-like digital currency that happens to use a different ECE curve and, you know, is pro-privacy. But fundamentally, it's still proof of work, and it's, you know, still a blockchain, and still TXOs and inputs. And so, like, this not invented yet syndrome leads to a whole bunch of stupidity and insaneness, or insanity rather. Specific issues that I have as well with like Ethereum, is just the fact that they've tried to do this whole let's have multiple implementations in multiple languages, which is not a bad thing. I'm not saying that that's like some sort of, you know, negative. The problem with it is their approach. Their approach has not been to first get it right in one language and then start working on other languages. Their approach has been to do multiple languages at the same time, then have disagreements about how an EIP should actually be implemented because the EIP was kind of vague, you know, and yet they still laud this whole like, oh, we have a spec, and so we just stick to the spec, and yet reality proves otherwise. Zcash, I guess my biggest complaints are the fact that it's highly centralized and requires an incredible amount of trust, not only in the moon math, not only in the implementation, but also in with the whole trusted setup. This centralized nature of development, where they make decisions as a company and then present it as a fait accompli to the community, is also just crazy. They shut down the subreddit. They shut down the IRC channels. You know, like for what?
And the Slack.
And the Slack. You know, I mean, like if you want to create community, you don't shut down the community channels, firstly. And secondly, like you don't make decisions like that without engaging the community. So clearly, like, you know, when with that sort of top-down decision model, like it can't be good for users. It's never going to be good for users because the assumption is that they are like with Vitalik, that they are the ultimate what is good and wholesome and correct. And that just provides a lever for an attacker to abuse. You know, I mean, the Ethereum price tanked because there were rumors of Vitalik's death. What a ridiculous, like, you know, what a ridiculous cult of personality has been created. I hope that if I die, the Monero price will go up because finally people will be like, oh, good, he can't troll anymore. Yes.
Well, I appreciate the thoughts on all that. And, you know, I guess you are on the Decred Assembly show, so I guess I will have to ask, you know, kind of what are your opinions on our project? Because for those of you that don't know out there, we kind of have similar roots. Named anonymous person named Taco Time kind of established the beginnings of us. So just wondering, you know, I don't know how much you even know about Decred, so if you could talk maybe about that for a second.
Sure. So yeah, like you mentioned, I mean, Taco Time was one of the 7 people, along with myself, that forked Monero away from Thankful for today. And I have a great deal of respect for Taco Time and for the research that he did on hybrid proof of work, proof of stake schemes. And so my primary interest with Decred was around that, around sort of hybrid proof of work, proof of stake schemes. I have a sort of passing interest in alternate governance models. I haven't done tons of research into how Decred works. But I mean, we had that little sort of back and forth on Twitter the other day that gave me a little bit of insight. And sort of, you know, like over and above that, there are a couple of other things I like about it. The fact that it uses BTCD as a basis, the fact that releases binaries are available for like every operating system on the planet. that's ever existed and will exist. A 32-bit Mac. Who has binaries for 32-bit Mac? Come on, guys.
I think I think
too hard. Come on.
Well, I think they actually stopped releasing those recently. But
Okay, because when I saw the 32-bit Mac support, I was like, I don't even know if I can find a 32-bit Mac that connects to the internet anymore. I mean, like, that was just crazy. But like I like that. You know, that sort of like tickles my nerd button. And I like stuff like that. And you know, the command line interface is pretty slick. I don't use the GUI when I have used it. And yeah, like sort of stuff like that appeals to me. I don't have a strong opinion on the pre-mine stuff and the amount set aside for the company.
Sure.
And I don't really care. You know, there are a lot of people that have very strong opinions on that, and like, you know, down with everything that has a company as a back end or as a sort of a driver. I do think that in general it's a bad idea, but like at the end of the day, if it works and if you know you're able to build a strong community, who cares?
Yeah,
I don't think that you guys are that Decred necessarily is sort of massively. What's the word I'm thinking? I don't think that Decred is as ideologically slanted as Monero is. Monero is extremely ideologically driven, where you know people will issue like profit making and will, you know, take decisions really slowly and work really slowly because that is more important to them than anything else, than sort of you know, I mean the sort of greater good is more important than like, oh, let's make a bunch of money. So I think that's sort of that's pretty critical. And ultimately, like Decred is one of those projects that when people claim that I hate every cryptocurrency that isn't Monero, I point to Decred as an example of a cryptocurrency I don't hate. And then they're like, yes, but that's because Decred doesn't threaten Monero. And then I point to the fact that they're adding privacy to Decred. And then they go, yes, but we have no more arguments. You're just and FUD. Rah.
And yeah, and you know, we are working on privacy stuff, but I think there's really kind of strikes my nerve in this space is the initial point of what everybody's been working on is to essentially fight the of banks and recently it seems like there's been a lot of fight each other. And I think one thing that I kind of is kind of, you know, projects aren't bad. They're different and everybody's doing things different, but that's a good thing. You know, and you know, some people are probably doing it for more of an incentive of money, but you know, I can see, you know, many of the developers that don't need the money. Like they were, you know, well off way before Bitcoin. So, you know, and I think you kind of spoke about BTCD, and I don't know if you know this, but the same devs are, or you know, there's obviously side of BTCD, but you know, they're the same devs that built Decred. And you know, I was wondering, maybe you could talk about your opinions on kind of what happened with BTCD when it was initially launched, because you know they kind of got blacklisted from the beginning of, you know, hey, software, because it's, you know, a fork, you know, it's a different implementation that can cause all these issues. Wondering kind of what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. So I mean, there had been things like Bitcoin J and whatever that were partial re-implementations of Bitcoin. You know, providing tools to do things like create transactions or whatever in other languages, or at least provide bindings. And BTCD was created by Conformal, and I was always impressed by the fact that they they didn't. It never came across as like a huge money-making project. You know, they were just like, well, we're going to do a re-implementation of Bitcoin in Go. And there was no like, we're going to do a re-implementation and it's going to be for enterprise users and we're going to sell it for $5,000 a month. It was just like, well, this is what we're doing. And it was all on, the source was available as they worked on it. And there was no like, there was no grandstanding. So I like that. There were serious concerns raised, like throughout, and those concerns by Bitcoin core developers, and those concerns really boiled down to the fact that if this picked up a lot of steam, and if it picked up a lot of users, then it would create a portion of the network that could split off in the event of there being an issue, of there being a bug in say BTCDs, whatever, you know. These are not invalid or incorrect concerns. I think at the time, because Bitcoin was younger than it is now, those claims were, or those concerns had a lot of validity. I think now, you know, given the number of different implementations that are running on the network, like Bitcoin Unlimited and all of that, and given the fact that Bitcoin Unlimited has in the past had an issue and crashed, and anyone running those, well, tough for them. I think that it's no longer a valid concern. I think anyone, and they are now large, not large, but they are significant portions of the network running BTCD for things like OpenBazaar and other projects that use it. So, you know, you're running it as a full Bitcoin node. You're running it as a backend, and it works. And, you know, it kind of works until it doesn't. And if a portion of the network splits off because of a bug, then, like, as we've seen, people will switch to core, or that bug will get patched and people will upgrade. And I think it will be disruptive, but it won't disrupt the network as a whole. Where previously, I think there was a concern that maybe it would disrupt the network as a whole because we'd end up with like say like a 50-50 split. But now we've got Bitcoin and a bunch of other implementations. So honestly, it's like less of a concern. And I mean, at the beginning, I saw the amount of flack that Conformal took for it, and I did feel that it was a little heavy-handed because I understood the concerns. I just felt that maybe those concerns could be like positioned in a different way or stated in a different way, you know, or at least there could be some support that would be lent to them because, you know, as part of a project like BTCD, you end up with a test suite that you can run against Bitcoin Core as well. You know, let's have a bunch of test transactions, blocks, and situations, networks, whatever. Let's see what happens if we do this and we do the other. Let's see how Core handles it, and let's see how BTCD handles it. If neither fall down and neither end up with like major performance degradation, great. We can end up with a common test framework to run against multiple implementations. So that's, I think, net positive, and I think that ultimately the attitude has changed because I've seen the same Bitcoin core developers that in the past had been sort of quite aggressively against it have subsequently now more recently pointed to it as alternative implementations, and how Bitcoin Core is not against alternate implementations. You know, not that they're massively embracing, but at least they're not sort of aggressively working against it either. So I think that that's kind of cool, and I think I think that change in attitude has been important. So yeah, I'm like, I for one am grateful for the work that that Conformal have done, or whatever they're called now. They're not Conformal anymore. They're
Company Zero.
Yeah, C0, Company Zero. I'm really grateful for the work they've done, because the other thing is, it taught me a lot about how multiple implementations might be handled. And one of the things that we want to do in Monero is end up with a very small, compact consensus library, and then encourage multiple implementations that all use that consensus library. They can go and re-engineer that consensus library at a later stage if they want, but at least like initially, let them go and work on their own database, their own wire protocol implementation, all that jazz, because at least we know the consensus library will weed out the vast majority of issues. At least we know that transactions by nodes written in multiple languages will all be accepted as transactions. Blocks will all be accepted as blocks. If they have a database issue underneath that, that's out of our control, but at least, we validated the block and passed it through in this library. So that's a takeaway that I got from that, because when I was thinking about how Core could have done it differently, and how they are actually, they're building libconsensus, it struck me as being an ideal way to encourage multiple implementations with less of a risk. And so that's, ultimately it's been cool for Monero, because that's the takeaway, and that's where we're busy working towards at the moment.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I think, the arguments that, there's multiple implementations of TCP/IP, and what this does is make the network more robust. And I think the amount of flack that they got for engineering Bitcoin Go kind of turned them off on Bitcoin. I mean, they still support BTC Suite today. It's not as efficient as it used to be, and I think it's been difficult for them to keep up with the core team has. But I think multiple implementations are always a good thing. So, and that was, I think, one of the many reasons that they went and spawned Decred. So, yeah, I guess you said earlier that why not just engineer this into Bitcoin or submit a pull request? And I think they tried that route, and some of the stuff didn't get accepted, and they had difficulty getting PRs in. So it is what it is. But so I'm going to start the audience questions now. Panel. The first question is a little bit, and we'll try to not be too long because we're already over time now. But you guys are awesome. As long as you have a little bit more time, Riccardo.
Sure.
Okay, great. So the first question was, I'm scrolling back. How can Kavri be used to benefit other projects? And maybe you can speak about Monero about this. I'm not familiar what Kavri is, unless you guys are too.
Sure. So Kavri is a Monero project. It lives on the Monero GitHub repo. It has its own set of contributors, but there's also a lot of contributor bleed between the two projects. There's a lot of stuff that Kavri does that Kavri has done that we benefit from in Monero. For example, we're now moving away from dumping stuff into our source tree and going towards using Git submodules, and that's because we've been doing it in Kavri and it's been successful. What Kavri actually is an I2P router, or router, I guess, if you're American. And I2P is a hidden services network, so it's like Tor. It's got a slightly different, not slightly different, it's got a very different structure and sort of way it works, but the net result is roughly the same, that you can run a hidden service and then you have end-to-end encryption, and the flow of traffic is hidden and obfuscated so that you can't tell where an actual service is running from. You can't tell its real IP address. Now, the advantage for Monero is that once Kavri reaches a state of maturity, of higher maturity than it is now, it's going to be bolted in to the Monero daemon, and then when transactions are broadcast on the network, by default, they will go over I2P. And blocks will still move over normal IPv4. So the advantage is that when you broadcast a transaction, your IP address will be obscured. That said, Kavri is not something we're writing just for Monero. it's a full-blown I2P router, and it will support SAM and a whole bunch of, eventually it'll support, you know, through sort of like external layers and so on, it'll support all of the I2P protocols. And ultimately, you know, you'll be able to like not care about Monero at all and run Kovri as an I2P router. The reason we didn't use the standard I2P router is because that's written in Java. And we didn't want to add a Java dependency to a project that ships as a compiled binary and doesn't need anything like that. So that's sort of, you know, you can imagine you're running in an environment like Cubes or Tails, having to suddenly install Java is like not ideal, especially considering the number of Java's days. So that's, you know, Kovri is not it's an independent project under the Monero project umbrella, and we're hoping to do more of those in future. So not necessarily like re-implementations or anything like that, but you know, if we wanted to create, or if somebody came along and they were like, hey, I want to create a store and forwarding messaging system, and this is my research paper, they can come build that under the Monero umbrella. They get the advantage of Monero having structure. They get the advantage of the Monero community being willing to fund stuff. They get the advantage of the Monero Research Lab researchers being able to review and pick at their research, and they get a bunch of contributors as a, you know, that will definitely hack away at stuff on the side at the beginning. So you've got, you know, there's massive advantage to that, and I think that Kovri is the first in the line of many, and the Monero project is going to be a sort of privacy epicenter where people who have interesting pro-privacy projects will come and they will build them, and that's great.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I could definitely see maybe Kovri being implemented on Decred. I can't speak for the developers though, but it sounds like it's something that could be ported over to some other projects, which is really cool. And I really support any sort of thing that brings the industry together as a whole instead of tearing it apart. I also had another question, you know, and I can't really speak to this, but you know, can we create synergies between the projects? I guess I think they're speaking between Decred and Monero. You know, I specifically had an idea, you know, maybe cross-chain atomic swaps after we both have privacy, I think could increase privacy between both projects. And you know, maybe what are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't think that the Monero community or the Monero developers or whatever are averse to anything like that. I think at the end of the day, it depends on what a synergy would look like. Certainly, you know, we'd like to get more contributors, and so that's obviously something that would be advantageous. And I don't know if we ever have like a Monero sort of a parallel implementation written in Go, then, you know, there could be the opportunity for contributors to sort of like bleed between the projects. Sure. Ultimately, you know, there's that, and there's also like the whole sort of funding thing, the fact that Monero is unfunded, and so, you know, if there's scope for like, oh cool, Monero created this thing and we want to use it, and so we're going to donate to the project because of that, that also then helps Monero development. And ultimately, like, we just want to, like I don't think that we aggressively reject anything in this space, except for bad projects and bad ideas that we sort of fundamentally reject as a community and as a whole. But sure, if there's scope for synergy and there's scope for people to work together, then like by all means. It's an open source project. I can't control what people do, yeah, or what I want to. And so if a Decred developer pitched up in a Monero dev meeting and said, hey, cool, what if we did this? Like, you know, the dev community is there. They can say yes or no. And so there's, you know, it's permissionless, and I'm powerless to stop anyone from doing anything. So yeah, by all means, if synergies are going to exist, they're going to exist.
Definitely. And excellent answer. And I totally agree. You know, same goes for Monero devs. Our project is very open to collaborating and working with developers. I mean, we need more developers too, just like any project in this space. So somebody had, I don't know, these probably are getting too specific. How can Decred benefit from your trolling services? You don't need to answer that.
Well, I don't know if they can afford my trolling services, but we can talk.
Hey, well, we have a DAO, so we can, you know, we can pitch in funds.
I make really good announcement videos. I don't know if you noticed.
Yeah, maybe you could talk about that. I meant to actually bridge into that conversation after the ICOs, but you know, maybe you could talk about briefly, because so most people probably don't know this, but I went to lunch meeting up with Colin Crypto and some other guys, and unbeknownst to me, Fluffy showed up, and I was actually a part of, you know, seeing the announcement a little earlier than I should have. And that was the first time we had actually ever met in person. And I don't know, maybe you could talk briefly about the announcement that, you know, obviously, I don't know. I thought philosophically it was really good, but, you know, at the same time, there's obviously some downside to that.
Yeah, so I created this announcement video for the Monero
Enterprise Alliance.
Enterprise Alliance. I can't even remember what it's called. And the website's still up. It's mea.business, and the video is amazing. You know, like it took me like 2 hours. It's great. So. And I did it all in iMovie on a Mac. At any rate, like part of it was born out of frustration. At Consensus, I was quite frustrated with some of the goings on, and with everyone releasing a token, and with, oh man, there were so many suits, and it just felt to me like we were losing our way, you know, and everyone had an announcement to make. And I was like, Monero doesn't have an announcement. And so, like, I did this whole thing as a joke because, you know, like in my mind, Monero is still like, whatever, 7 people in an RSC channel. Who pays attention to Monero? Come on. And at any rate, yeah, some people, the announcement video was well received. With other people, not so much, because the price did a little pump, and then did a little dump after the announcement video was released. In all honesty, I don't know. I mean, like I created a little write-up about, you know, like if that announcement video frustrated you, like, you know, yeah, some things to think about. And so some people took that as as like, oh, FluffyPony was trying to teach an object lesson, which is also not true. I didn't go into that going like, I will teach everyone a lesson. Look at me. I am the teacher of lessons. I went into that going like, this is hilarious. Everyone's going to laugh. And yeah, not everyone laughed. Apparently, you know, saying there's going to be an announcement was the same as, like, you know, as announcing that SegWit is coming to Monero, which is nonsense because we already have SegWit. We've had SegWit since last year. And it's like, it's just crazy that that people took it so seriously. I couldn't believe it. But it was like, you know, I only really realized that people were taking it seriously, like, as it happened. Because, I mean, all of this happened in such a short period of time. And by then it was too late. It was like, you know, oh dear. So I made sort of like an apology video, not an apology video, but just like a video where I discussed how I'd misread the situation and how I'd underestimated the change in the Monero community, and the fact that the Monero community was a lot bigger than it was in 2014. And I don't know, that was just my stupidity. So lessons learned. Yeah, not something I'm going to be repeating. I will definitely make more videos but I will not make like troll announcements like that. Lessons learned.
Yeah, and well, and I think the people that were mainly disappointed by the announcement were primarily people that were newer to Monero. I mean, because like, I don't know, the language of the tweets that went out and stuff, I thought it was somewhat pretty obvious that this was not like, it's Monero, which is already pretty open and transparent on, you know, what's going on. And I think there, you know, there's not like a secret group of you guys that are probably, you know, trying to make these enterprise alliance deals against whatever what your whole community is about. That I don't know.
It's what we're doing.
It's
you know,
split, I guess, for others. Yeah,
it's completely the opposite of everything. So yeah. Anyway, it's I don't know. Like it's just it definitely is just lessons learned. Like I think like, you know, we've moved on as a community. Occasionally there's some clown on Reddit, a Ohio Moonchild, that he like tries to use every thread to be like, yes, get rid of FluffyPony because all he does is destroy things. He's the destroyer of worlds and destroyer of Moneros too. Yeah. Anyway.
Yep. Yeah. And okay, well, I'm gonna take one last question, and somebody already asked it, and it has to do with. I'll switch the camera to me. It has to do with CryptoNote. So it says CryptoNote has one centralized point of failure. If someone or AI or quantum computers or whatever breaks ring signature anonymity, currencies blockchain will be completely de-anonymized. Is it secure enough?
Well,
I don't know,
go ahead.
If you have any thoughts, or even Austin, or
I mean, if you're that crypto is so well understood. If you break it, we have a lot bigger problems than Monero breaking.
Yeah. That's, I mean, the traceable ring sigs is not exactly a new research paper that's just come out. And we're talking about stuff that like Austin said is very well understood. That said, even if there were some phenomenal break that led to people being able to trivially figure out which is the true signer in an input in a ring signature based on the key image, then it would compromise Monero's traceability, but it would not compromise ring CT, and it would not compromise Monero's linkability, or unlinkability rather. So, you know, the stealth addresses would still work. The amounts being hidden would still work. So you would still get reasonably strong privacy just from those two, at least stronger privacy than you would get from just using Bitcoin as an example. So it's not like our entire privacy model depends on passive analysis failing. And in fact, ring signatures are the weakest of our privacy claims, because choosing transactions to mix with and what that looks like, and the distribution of that, and whether you choose how you weight recent transactions versus older transactions, that entire mechanism is ongoing. You know, we don't have the perfect the perfect distribution right now. We've got a reasonable distribution. We use triangular distribution, but we also weight 30% of the outputs towards recent transactions. Maybe that's good enough. Maybe it's not. All of this is ongoing research, and we consider that our weakest privacy claim, and an area where we're never going to stop researching. So I don't think a substantial break in it would be that much worse than what we have right now, which is, hey, this is the weakest area when it comes to privacy. It's entirely possible, by the way, that with large enough data gathering and with enough clever guesswork, and with enough subpoenas to exchanges and service providers, who are the largest creators of transactions in the network on an individual basis, that someone can make educated guesses as to the traceability of transactions. And maybe those educated guesses, despite our best efforts, are reasonably good. And so maybe traceability in Monero is pretty weak as it is, in which case no amount of clever foot movements and whatever will make a big difference. It'll always be the weakest area with regards to privacy claims. But the other two areas that of ring CT obscuring amounts and stealth addresses obscuring the destination are extremely strong, and we're extremely confident in those by comparison. So you're not going to lose unlinkability. You're not going to lose transaction amount hiding just because one area ends up being weaker than we imagine.
Yeah, I don't get the sense that loss of privacy would be a big concern. My bigger concern would be a break in soundness that would allow allow minting of coins that wouldn't be detectable until after the bug was found and searched for. That would be my bigger concern.
No, I agree, and that's why with Monero we're sort of we're very careful about a lot of the stuff that we've done because of that, and because of the very high risk of the economic model being at risk. I saw somebody said, I think on Twitter the other day, that because with Zcash, for example, the risk of the economic model being broken is often sort of hand waved away, or at least sort of poo-pooed down into the corner. And someone on Twitter said the other day, like, well, if your economic model is broken, then what's the point? Like, it doesn't matter that you provide strong privacy. If the economic model is broken, then you're not a currency, you're a joke. And
right. Yeah,
that's really it.
Right. And there are people, like, I think, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think Peter Todd thinks of it that way too. He doesn't, at least from what he said publicly, he doesn't hold Zcash. He passes through it like a sort of a grand trustless mixer.
Yeah. Yeah.
My guess,
and he trusts himself. He trusts himself in his OPSEC, so that's why he's able to do that.
Exactly. Yeah. That's interesting.
It's a really great blog for all of you guys out there. The Peter Todd Zcash story and the desolate Canadian highway. It's it's an excellent story if you guys haven't read it. Okay, well, and one of the last things I want to say to that is I think a lot of people, and a lot of cryptographers probably realize that one day encryption will be broken, and it's just kind of pushing that timeline out as far as possible.
Yeah,
that they can.
Yeah, pretty much all of your TLS sessions, your HTTPS stuff, all of that's being recorded, and one day your TLS encryption is going to be broken. So everything you do on the web is probably going to be decrypted one day anyway. Might as well just push it out as long as we can.
Push it out beyond your death.
Yeah, once I'm dead, it's fine. They can decrypt everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then your ancestors and all your grandchildren and stuff are subject to whatever. But anyways, okay. Well, so I think we're gonna wrap up the show. It's been almost 2 hours. Thank you, Riccardo, for coming on the show. You have been a really awesome guest. I think we had a lot of really great conversation. Thank you, Austin, for joining us on the show. Always great to have you. And one of the last things to give you guys a heads up on, on July 10th, we're actually going to have Charlie Lee from Litecoin on the show. A big member in the Decred community for a while now. He also contributed to one of the white papers that spawned what created Decred. So really excited to have him on the show. I think it's going to be at 3 p.m. Pacific time on Monday, July 10th. And all of you guys out there that have been watching the show, please like the show, tweet about it, comment. If you want other people to be able to come and find it and see the show. Yeah, and happy 4th of July, everybody. And we will see you next time. Riccardo, do you have any last words? Anything you want to say? I think we had a lot of Monero people watching too. So.
No, like if anyone wants to get involved with Monero, you're more than welcome to. That does not mean I'm saying go and buy Monero. Please don't buy Monero unless you have a specific need for it, and unless you've done some research and you know exactly what you're doing. And I don't know, follow me on Twitter at FluffyPony.
Yeah. And Austin, you can follow him at Twitter at One Way Function. That's his Twitter username. And you can follow me.
You could follow him.
Yep. Did we lose him?
I think so.
Oh no.
That's not the ideal point to lose him.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I think he's in control of making us not live anymore. So this will be fun to see how long it takes. Yeah, I think he was piggybacking on a cell connection.
Oh man.
Yeah, we might have to wait till the wind blows the other. There he is. All right.
Oh, there we go. He's back.
Yeah, sorry. Like